Week 5 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few players I look to buy and trade for this week. The first guy, Jamar Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. So Jamar Waddle, so far he's gone off to a slow start in the early going of this season. Only 32.80 fantasy points in PPR leagues. I know he missed Week 3's ball game with the concussion, was Jamar Waddle, but right now the targets haven't been there. He only has Week 1 at the Chargers in that game, 4 catches, 78 yards. Week 2 in New England, in that one, 4 catches, 86 yards. Week 3 missed versus Denver with a concussion. And then Week 4, Buffalo in a blowout loss, 4 catches, 46 yards. So this week, a good matchup coming up versus the New York Giants. And right now, Jamar Waddle, he's not putting up those elite numbers like he did earlier last season. His offense has been pretty much Tyreek Hill, Devon A-Chain, and Raheem Mostert to start the season. So right now, while Jamar Waddle, the targets haven't been there, the production hasn't been there, and he's struggling in the early going. Right now, I think you could put out a mediocre offer and get him on your fantasy team as Jamar Waddle, especially if owners are 1-3, 0-4, and they want to turn things around here before it's too late, because once you get to that 0-5, 0-6 range, your fantasy season is over. So right now, with Waddle, he hasn't really been a big part of the offense and was concussed in Week 3. This is a perfect time to buy him low, because it only takes a game or two for Waddle to get things going, and we know he's a big-time wide receiver. Last season, only almost having 1,400 yards on the year. He's in a high-powered offense, so right now, while he's struggling, he's a perfect play to buy low this week. The next play is Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Jamar Chase, he's very frustrated not getting a lot of targets and not getting the football. And he said it at the end of the ball game in Week 4 at the Titans, that just get him the ball and he's open pretty much every play. So far in the season, Jamar Chase, he's had one pop game. And then in Week 4, his game at Tennessee, not a horrible game, but still wasn't the type of numbers you want to see from Chase. Week 4, 7 catches, 73 yards at the Tennessee Titans that do give up the 4th most fantasy points to receivers on the season. So right now, Joe Burrow definitely isn't 100%. Jamar Chase is very frustrated. He's not getting the football. I know the last 2 weeks he's definitely improved his numbers and gotten better, but right now he's not even close to playing at that first round level that we know he could play at. So right now, while he's struggling and he's very frustrated, this is a perfect time to go out there and get him, because I think this Cincinnati Bengal team, they're going to make adjustments. They could get right in the next ball game with Arizona that have one of the worst secondaries in the league, and you could throw all over them. So right now, while Chase has had one big game, one mediocre game, and 2 poor games to his fantasy resume this season, he's definitely a wide receiver and a play to go out there and get this week, because Chase, could carry a fantasy team for a few weeks where he has those big fantasy games, 25, 30 points. So right now, well, he struggled every week this year pretty much. Only a play to go out there and buy this week. The next play is Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. So Tony Pollard, so far this season, he's still amongst the top 10 in fantasy points at the running back position. But the last 2 weeks, the numbers have dropped off, and even the work's dropped off a little bit. Week 3 at Arizona, 23 carries, 122 yards. 3 catches, -1 yards. And then Week 4 versus the Patriots, only 11 carries, 47 yards, 3 catches, 13 yards. I know the Cowboys, the 3 victories they've had this season, they've blown teams out by 20 points or more, and Tony Pollard, they're not going to use him, obviously, in those games in the second half where they got a huge lead and you don't want anyone to get hurt. So right now with Pollard, he's still putting up decent value on the season. That's a 3rd, 4th round value, even though he was a 1st, 2nd rounder. In the last 2 games, his numbers have dropped off, and he does have a tough matchup at the San Francisco 49ers. I think this is a time for fantasy owners to go out there and get Tony Pollard, because if he could turn things around and put up big numbers for fantasy owners, he's a guy that could help you down the stretch this season. So right now, before he has a breakout game, because if he has a breakout game versus San Francisco, one of the best defenses in the league, there's no way you're going to get him on a discount. So buy Pollard this week. Next play is George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So George Kittle this season, he's had pretty much all bad games, except Week 3 versus the Giants where he had a big one, 7 catches, 90 yards. And Week 4 versus Arizona, it obviously was the Christian McCaffrey show. He only had 1 catch, 9 yards. So the next couple weeks, it's going to be ball games versus better competition. Week 3 versus the Giants and Week 4 versus Arizona. Those games were laughers for the most part for this San Francisco 49er team. So Week 5 versus Dallas, a team where he's had pretty good history versus, is George Kittle. And then Week 6 at Cleveland, another team that's been playing pretty decent. I know last week they didn't play good at all with the backup quarterback, but if Watson's back in that game, it could be a little bit of a close game. So right now, George Kittle, he's not playing good football this season. Only 29 fantasy points in PPR on the year. And I know the tight end position's a weak one this year. A lot of inconsistencies and plays not making plays really. Besides the Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, everyone else hasn't really contributed in Hawkinson to the tight end position. So right now, while Kittle hasn't done much, and you could get him on a big discount this week here, he's definitely a play to buy. The next play is Jamar Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So this Patriot team, they found themselves in the hole a lot this year. The first 3 out of 4 ball games. Week 1 versus Philly, they were down 17 to start that one, but Stevenson carved out a decent game with 14.90 fantasy points. Week 2 versus Miami, they were down quick in that one. Stevenson at 15, but the last 2 weeks he hasn't done much. Week 3, the Jets, 7.20 fantasy points, 19 carries, 59 yards, a catch, 3 yards. And then week 4 at Dallas, that ball game got out of hand by the late first, early second quarter of 14 carries, 30 yards, 2 catches, 10 yards. I know Ezekiel Elliott is eating into the workload a little bit here for Stevenson, but he's still getting about 70% of the carries and touches, and he's a good wide receiver out of the backfield as well who can catch the football. So right now, with the next couple games being games where I think it's going to be close for this New England Patriot team, where it's not going to be blowouts and they got to abandon the run versus New Orleans and Vegas in the next 2 weeks. After coming off 2 poor ball games, this is a perfect time, in my opinion, to go out there and get Ramondre Stevenson. Like I said, he's one of the better receiving backs in the league. PPR leagues, he's definitely a huge asset for fantasy owners. And right now, while the numbers haven't been there, I think he gets back on track with 2 good matchups coming up. And games are going to be close, and they're not going to abandon the run. So right now, I will buy Stevenson this week. The next play is Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers. So Christian Watson finally came off the hamstring injury, and he still was snap count where he didn't play a majority of the snaps, but he did find the end zone on Thursday Night Football in Week 4 versus Detroit. 2 catches, 25 yards, and a touchdown on 4 targets. So we know Watson, he's a touchdown machine. Last season, his rookie year, he had 7 touchdowns, and he really didn't emerge until Week 7, Week 8 was last year for Christian Watson. So right now, obviously, if that hamstring's 100% or almost there, he's going to be on the field more, and he's a dynamic playmaker and a wide receiver. So this week, he's got a good matchup on Vegas on paper, and then a bye week, and hopefully after that bye week, he could be 100% is Christian Watson. But to have 11 days off in between games definitely could help. That he came back on that Thursday night game, and Week 5 here, Vegas is a Monday Night Football game. So right now, we know Watson's a dynamic wide receiver. Didn't do much in Week 1, but he did find the end zone. And him and Jordan Love, I think, are going to have good rapport and can make big plays. So right now, while Watson isn't 100% and a guy trying to get his way back into the lineup after making his debut, he's a player I would buy this week. Final player I look to buy is Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Mike Evans, he left that ball game with a hamstring injury in Week 4 versus at the New Orleans Saints, and he finished that one 3 catches, 40 yards. So Evans this season, he's come out of nowhere once again after having a down year last year. Even though he did have 1,000 yards, I didn't think this season he could have come into the year with a better season to kick it off than he did last year going into the year with Brady. So far for Evans, he's had big games. Week 1 in Minnesota, 6 catches, 66 yards, a touch. Week 2 versus Chicago, we went off 6 catches, 171 yards, a touchdown. Week 3 versus Philly, 5 catches, 60 yards, and a touch on 10 targets. And then Week 4 with the injury. So right now, I think he's going to get right as Mike Evans. It's a bye week here in Week 5 for this Tampa Bay Buc team, and they got some favorable matchups. Week 6 versus Detroit, you could throw on them and make plays. And Week 7 versus Atlanta. So right now, if you want to line things up the next few weeks here and get a big impact wide receiver as long as he's healthy, which I think he will heal in time, is Mike Evans. This would be the time to do it, because if he comes back after the bye and puts up those big numbers and he's healthy, he's not going to be a player that can help fantasy owners. That's a few players I look to buy and trade for here in Week 5 of the fantasy football season.